PlexTrack is the platform that helps cybersecurity practitioners get the daily work done. Red teams can create reports in half the time and track risk to resolution with the blue team. Teams can centralize remediation efforts across all scans, assessments, and audits. Effectively communicate risk in real time through simple visualizations, scanner and ticketing integrations, and robust analytics. PlexTrack is perfect for collaboration across all teams. Visit securityweekly.com/PlexTrack to claim your free month. Qualys has brought together vulnerability management and patch management, letting security teams discover vulnerabilities and apply patches immediately, all within a single, unified app. Sign up for a free trial of Qualys VMDR, vulnerability management, detection, and response today at securityweekly.com/Qualys. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. If you want to stay in the loop, all things Security Weekly, visit securityweekly.com/subscribe. Subscribe via your favorite podcast catcher to all the shows on our network. We've got shows on compliance, shows for CISOs and leadership, all kinds of shows. Application Security Weekly. Dr. Doug White does the news every week. You can subscribe to all those shows and more, including our mailing list, YouTube channel, and Discord by visiting securityweekly.com/subscribe. Our next webcast, the one we did today, was a lot of fun. We got Linux and Nerdy with Brandon from Capsulate, and it was awesome. The next one will be April 29th, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. You're going to learn how to prepare for modern ransomware attacks with none other than Jake Williams. Visit securityweekly.com/webcasts. Former NSA hacker. Everyone uses the former NSA hacker, right? Jake Williams will be on for the next webcast.
That'll be a good time.
Gonna be fun. So,
speaking of good times,
you want to have a good time with Joff? Yeah. For a good time, email Joff. Sorry, Joff has an announcement.
So you want me to say something? No, I was going to do my 5-minute plug for my upcoming class. Some of you may have seen this on the Twitters. I did a class called Enterprise Attacker Emulation and C2 Implant Development. We ran this class back in January. We had a really, really great attendance. It was the first run of the class. I think it was amazingly successful. In fact, I think Tyler, our co-host, was part of the class, and I think Tyler very much enjoyed the class. We are running the same class again this May the 4th. It is virtual under the Wild West Hack and Fest platform. And it is Enterprise Attacker Emulation and C2 Implant Development. We go over a number of great techniques, talking about commodity C2 frameworks, talking about threat modeling and attacker emulation, anatomy of C2 channels, talking about an open C2 wrap framework that I developed, talking about a lot of different techniques for shellcode execution, for process injection, and just a bunch of really, really good stuff. So it's a 16-hour course. It's relatively inexpensive. We're charging $495 a head, and we're gonna have a good time. So what we do is over 4 days, we do 4 hours a day. So a nice pace. There's a virtual machine that I provide via Azure for all of the materials. And we have labs that go along with it. And I guess the other thing I should mention is that we donate a portion of the proceeds from the class to underrepresented communities in the information security world. And those are female women groups today that are demographically underrepresented in the information security community. So we try to, we're running at about 10%, I think is the number, of the proceeds go to our underrepresented communities in information security. So it's about 3 or 4 different groups that we donate to, and it's a really good time. So I hope you'd like to sign up and join me.
Jeff, you may have said it already, and what are the dates?
We're starting May the 4th for this class,
May the 4th
through May the, I guess that would be the 7th. So 4 hours a day. We run 11 a.m. Well, actually, it's usually noon to 4 EST. 11 a.m. on the first day, just so everybody can get orientated and stuff. And I did flip to a web page to look at that, so you probably saw that nice glow off of my face. But Yep. And we're also running the same thing at Wild West Hackin' Fest Way West in Reno, Nevada in June, if you're interested as well. And that one will be a live class over 2 days, which I'm teaching on June the 15th and 16th, if I've got that correctly. No, 14th and 15th.
You got it right.
There we go.
15th and 16th, I'm on the Wild West Hacking Fest.
Oh my God! I'm
Discord
glad somebody's
server right
keeping
now.
me straight.
And
So
Joff,
anyway,
Joff, the one at Wild West is in person only, correct?
It is in person only. That is correct.
Roger
if
that.
you come
Oh, is
into
that the
Wild
one in
West,
Reno, Nevada or something?
Reno, Nevada?
That's way west.
Right. Wild West Hackin' Fest Way West, which we're really, really looking forward to. First of all, I'm getting out of the house. So it's like the first time traveling in over a year. The last trip I went on was California in February of 2020. So I have not been out of the house for a long time. So I'm looking forward to that. If you want to come to the class in person, and actually have this in person only, by the way, that one's not going to be video streamed remote. Then the June opportunities open for you. So either way, love to have you. And hey, Tyler, I can actually ask Tyler this. What did you think of the first class? Because you were one of my students.
The class was actually fantastic. From a malware development standpoint, it is one of the best classes I've taken. I've taken quite a few.
I was going to say, is it the only class on malware development that you've taken, Tyler?
No, I've actually helped write a class, and I've taught a class on it. And seeing how Joff did his class, it was very well put together, very easy to understand. From like if you needed to come into it and you didn't have prior malware development, it is teaching you next level techniques. These are essential for any mature client. This is what you have to know in order to operate at the level of a decent red team. So I think from that standpoint, like this is a great entry point for people that are trying to up their game in the offensive space. And if you're just looking for some good TTPs and some malware development, Joff has done a great job with his tool, and I've already expanded what he's done. So it's,
Hey, Tyler.
it's pretty good.
Hey, Tyler. I'm always looking for some good TTPs. Hit me up after the show.
I'll
Maybe.
get you
And
some
by the way,
TTPs,
just for the record, I did not pay Tyler anything to say that.
Yet.
I paid Joff to say that in his class.
No, he was legitimately a student in my class. He was excited to be there, and I asked him for very honest criticism and peer review, and of course, he's actually just given it to you live on the show. So he also gave it to me in private. So we have a really good time.
What?
Yeah, whatever.
What's going on?
I sent.
show.
And that's the news.
That concludes the news for this week. Thanks everyone for listening and watching. We'll see you next time.
I sent three students to that class, and the comments they had other comments, but one comment was mind equals blown.
One comment was the good comment. And that's what we'll go with.
Yeah. One comment was humbling, and one comment was I was giving it to Joff in private. But
Wow, this is a tough
that
class.
cost extra.
Oh,
Tough
man.
crowd tonight. Is the kind of crowd you don't want to use SMS text messages for your second factor or your password.
Love of God.
And I think that becomes a segue right here, right now.
Although I do want to
throwing it
clarify,
back to
like
Paul.
I would love to put this out there. There was a lot of banter on Twitter about this, and personally, I had to step back and think about this from the standpoint of what your threat vectors are and what security improvements you are doing by adding a second factor, even if it is SMS, adding that next level to deter attackers or just plain old credential stuffing or password guessing. SMS is still better than not having it. And there was a bunch of pushback on Twitter about that you should just not have it. If you're going to have SMS, just don't have it. I still kind of think
stupid.
that this is the first time we've seen a real good public demonstration of how SMS can be abused. I mean, we've been abusing it, and we've talked about and advised our clients about how not to do SMS, two-factor, and that's just good practice if you have highly secure things to do. But it's still better than not doing two-factor at all. And I still think it's considered a second factor.
Agreed.
I mean, if you're gonna use SMS, Tyler, to your point, it doesn't exclude you from using a good password, right? Or it also doesn't excuse you from using the same password for all of your services. Like those are still good things to do. You have that second factor there, even if it's SMS, for an additional layer of protection. But also keep in mind the different ways that it's used. How is SMS used if you want to reset your password? It shouldn't be the only thing. Possession of your phone necessarily maybe shouldn't be the thing that allows you to just reset your password. I think that's the kind of weaker thing for SMS to be able to protect you against, or it's weaker in protecting you against that. I think if you run under the assumption that if an attacker has my password and there's SMS, make them go through the steps of finding your password somewhere, hope that it was unique. So if they got the LinkedIn breach, which by the way, Darknet Diaries did a great podcast on the LinkedIn breach. If they got your password, make sure it was only for LinkedIn. And if your LinkedIn account had a second factor, like, you're good even if LinkedIn leaks their whole database with password hashes that aren't salted, because like that happened in 2011.
That did happen.
Yep.
So,
and then they still got to get your user ID as a way to get to your phone. I mean, not that all of those things are doable,
Right.
but it's about how fat of a vector is it, like Tyler
Right.
said. So,
Yeah.
also, but now let's talk about this attack for a little
Yeah.
bit. This was Sakari is a service that allows you to send out these text messages, and you enter your phone, kind of like validating that it's you,
Right.
but then they're able to receive your text messages.
Right.
Yeah.
So effectively, what
Correct.
they're doing, they're a service that
Interesting.
is becoming your SMS, your text provider
Oh,
Proxy.
proxy.
SMS
I
proxy.
see.
Excellent.
It's an
Yeah,
SMS
right.
proxy. That's what you're signing up for, and they're
Yes.
just.
And
But hold on, they don't send you a text message to validate
Nope.
that you have the
No.
phone.
No. They
Oh,
they
well,
have
that's
they,
their fault
They have a
first.
little thing on their site that says, "Yes, I'm the registered owner of this phone number, and I have the rights and I have permission to do this."
How does-
Affidavit of
Attestation.
Attestation.
attestation. Yep.
But hold on, can't the providers do something about that? Like, how do they get the
They
messages
should,
from
but
the
they don't.
provider? That was my question. Like, why can't the providers do something to shut these services down? Like, the providers should have
Because of
maybe
the way
an
the backend
attestation that says
because that level of SIM access to your phone facilitates you being able to do all these kind of things that people actually do want to do, which is being able to consolidate or generate messages like Hootsuite and all those
Oh,
kind
I
of things.
see.
So the providers don't want to do away with this because lots of people use these kind of services to push out,
Okay, that
like a
makes sense.
massive
And-
blast.
But why can't they require?
And they said that they're legit. Like, they checked the box.
That's
saying
right.
That,
They
that
signed
they,
it.
were- that
check
they
the
were
box saying
permitted to
this
do
is
that.
really my phone number?
Yep.
But
they almost need a two-factor for the two-factor.
yeah, all they need to do, it's really easy. Send the person a text message with a code and say, send me this code to verify that that's your number.
It's a
Exactly.
recursive.
And that was very much one of the things that Lucky 225 said was one of
Yeah.
the possible solutions.
That's a great
this problem.
solution.
Yeah.
Yep.
But there's
So-
other companies. Like, there's a ton of companies.
There's a-
that-
yeah.
This isn't the
to
only
this
one.
company.
They just picked this one, but everybody's
Yep.
using this as a mechanism. So that just happened to be the one that Lucky 225 picked
Yeah,
to
225,
do this. Yeah.
So can you just
But you
go
look at
register
S-
your own number with all of these services, so it's already registered? So if someone else tries to do it, it's almost like having
Well, you got to pay for it.
You got to pay
Yeah.
for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the back end of S7, you look at the back end of cellular, and even like SIP traffic and the way that those back end networks, these have been in play and designed from long before we were thinking about the security of this stuff. And you start to talk about how we have to be cross-carrier compatible, how we have to be able to port numbers, how numbers carry over between phones and SIMs. Like, these systems are not designed with that level of operability or scrutiny from the provider's level, at least yet.
Yeah, like why if someone wants to port a number, for example, they have to know your PIN code as one of the pieces of information. But
If you have locked.
anyone can sign up for this service, and this service then can receive your text messages. Doesn't these services have to register with the provider and go, hey, for that number, I want to receive all of its text messages, and what they have a link to the back end that the providers just let them do that?
They register with the providers with the understanding that they're going to have customers. They don't know which customers, and so they get a blanket kind of make sure you validate.
Interesting.
Yep. It's like
that's ugly.
It's like you
That's
get
gross.
It's like you get a license in the state to serve alcohol, and you're at a restaurant, and the restaurant is the one that is supposed to be checking the IDs,
Right.
Not the liquor delivery folks and the state to come in and check every ID to make sure that every drink you're serving is being served to someone over the age of 21. It's your responsibility to check, and some restaurants don't check very well.
It's a lot of trust to give to these third-party providers.
It is, especially from SMS. You start to think about like backup codes. Like I've recently spent a painstaking amount of time trying to recover many accounts that were two-factored and did not have
With that USB thumb drive with the Bitcoin on it?
Yes, the one with the Bitcoin on it.
We have to bring that up every show. We're just gonna rub some salt in the wound every week.
Just drive it in a little
It keeps
deeper.
going up too. It just keeps going up.
The problem is that he can't do that authentication with the drive with the Bitcoin on it because he can't find it.
Right. Oh. Poor Tyler.
But the two-factor like SMS, like that's a great validation if there's no other means and the company has validated your phone prior. I think it requires some extra steps, and I'm happy for some of these companies that are taking the extra measures to have a call, validate some information, whether it's a state photo ID, whatever it is, in order to recover. It makes me wonder how they're recovering if, my authentication is tied to a key or token or seed, but that's besides the point. I'm gaining access back to my accounts with some additional scrutiny, and I think that's something that you have to judge your threat profile and understand which accounts are critical that you need to turn off SMS recovery. You need to make sure that those are, token only or an app only, or whether they're push or not. Like we've abused push accounts, two-factor push all the time. Like you sit and hit push accounts, 100 times. I guarantee your user's going to finally hit approve
they're gonna
because they
eventually
don't know what's
say
going
yes.
on. They will.
Yeah, they will. I mean, I've done the same thing. I mean, Tyler's exactly right. It's just like, you just keep hammering them, and they're like, oh, look, fuck it, I give up. Yes.
And then it goes away, and they're like, see, it was just a glitch.
Right.
No harm, no foul. So, yeah, I think this is a good example of, like, picking your threat profile, picking your security to match the level of security that is necessary for what you're trying to secure, and ensuring that the general public, like this is obviously something that is a higher level issue with the providers and SMS proxying or gateways. So that does need to be addressed, but would you just have to, like, it's kind of the same thing when you start to look at Macs, right? Like they have their iMessage on their computer, and if two-factor set up through iMessage, like I can see your two-factor come in, grab a screen capture, and now it just authenticated and I didn't have your phone. And that's supposed to be a secure method of, two-factor. Right?
My next question is, if we're on Signal and you use Signal to send me a message, they can't decrypt that, can they? If it's sent via Signal, not
Overlay.
Well,
so Signal using SMS is a little bit different, though, right? Because you're still using SMS. If you're doing Signal to Signal, it's end-to-end encryption, and you're not using technically your phone number.
Right.
But your phone number, if you're using Signal, in order for it to hit the phone number, it still has to hit the S7 backend network.
Yeah,
and
but
therefore it is SMS.
On your phone, Tyler, and on my phone, we communicate via Signal, and the button's blue, therefore it's going to use the Signal's encryption protocol. And even if someone's intercepting either my number or your number, they're not going to see the clear text message. They only see the clear text message if they have my Signal client or your Signal client.
That's not SMS.
Yeah.
Like if you sent me an SMS from your phone number to my phone number via SMS.
So if it's gray, if it's the gray button in Signal, it's SMS.
Right.
If it's blue, like we're good. It's not actually going over
Blue
SMS.
is going through their server and being encrypted, as far as the way I understand it.
Oh, so it's not actually going.
It's not an
through-
SMS message.
I gotcha.
SMS still traverses the S7. It has to traverse the
Gotcha.
backend provider S7 network.
So then why can't you use Signal if you just have Wi-Fi?
Because Signal's not tied to your phone for SMS, right? Like if these companies are using SMS proxying, and most of the time the companies that are doing two-factor authentication via phone are sending through an SMS gateway on their backend API, that's going to hit the phone networks and come down and drop in via SMS.
Yeah, I mean, you can use Signal just data to data if you want, but it's got to be to somebody on the other end that is
also Signal.
Yeah. It can't be an SMS, right?
It's point to point.
I think Moxie, but I think Moxie did say he was working on a way to have Signal be completely autonomous from your cell number.
Yeah, and that's what needs to happen ultimately.
Yes.
But that still wouldn't solve the fact that the
Your
provider is going
two-factor,
to utilize a cell phone number, right? So we're still kind of, I don't know, the cell phone number, and that brings back another point. Like, what about old cell phone numbers that get rolled? Like you do burner numbers, or like you would not believe the kind of stuff that I get from the burner app coming in on numbers that are just rotated through, right? Like there's all kinds of stuff that comes in. So there is a problem with this mechanism, but I think we still need to look at it as a step in the right direction for the general public to get used to having a second factor, having a number to type in after they log in with a password. Like this was a step in the right direction, but we do need to start to look at maturing further.
Well, we need to get everybody used to using an actual dedicated app for the second factor is where we need to go.
Which is, I still think is hard. Like, I still think having two-factor is there, right? Like I can't see my grandma actually installing an app to then do two-factor, but she's used to her bank sending her a text message that she then has to type in after she signs into her bank app. I just don't know if we'll ever make that leap.
Well, and let alone a physical token.
Yeah, I physical token's not going to work, but I don't think it's that much of a leap to take somebody to an app. Especially when there are lots of examples of shared apps, like Duo, like Google Authenticator, like there's many of them that quite happily play in this space. I don't think it's that much to ask for people to go that direction.
Maybe training, like if everybody on Facebook or Snapchat having to use a regular app had to use one of those apps as part of just the platform, I think that would be a push in the right direction, and that would get them used to adopting something like that.
Yeah, it would have to be one of the really large players that pushed them in that direction. I agree.
Facebook actually supports the YubiKey.
Yeah, it does.
Awesome.
I actually had
that's
one.
That's right.
Yeah. I used YubiKey with that and with Google and all kinds of stuff. So, and that's not that hard. I actually had it set up for a couple of people that weren't very astute.
Yeah.
On their bank accounts because I was worried about it, and I had that set up for my dad because I was really worried about that.
Yes.
But he had tech block kind of thing, and I was just like, look, all you got to do is just touch this, and that's it. And it actually worked for him. It took a few tries to get him up going on it, but I was so much better, and I felt so much better about it.
Newfangled things make me feel old sometimes. Like I'm still trying to figure out what do they call it? A nifty NFT? But there's
Nifty?
another Nifty? Do they call it a Nifty?
It's a Nifty.
A Nifty.
Is that
right?
that salt shaker porn you were talking about?
No, it's not.
I mean, that's
actually.
Wait.
There's so much money happening in this stupid Nifty thing where you're basically getting a hash validated or blockchain validated
Like
digital rights to something original.
Yep.
So that could be an image or
It
like
just,
a tweet, right?
it means you own
audio, a
it.
tweet.
So it's like a hash of something that says because it's digital. So if Banksy was to make a digital picture, everybody could just copy it, and so it's.
This has a digital signature that does two things, right? Validates that image is that image, but also validates on the owner.
Yes. And so the example that I saw, the analogy for Nifties was that, like, if you go to the Louvre and you look at the Mona Lisa and you cheat and you take a picture of it, you have a picture of the Mona Lisa. You don't have the Mona Lisa.
Right.
So the blockchain hash is actually saying that you own the Mona Lisa. Or, the digital version of it.
So you can own something digital just like you would own something in the physical world.
Yeah, and so then it comes down to this kind of art versus reality sort of thing. It's like, is looking at a poster of the Mona Lisa sufficient for you?
Right.
Or do you just have to say, I own it, by God, it's mine? I don't care if everybody else can see it too, but it's like, this is
Can there
mine.
only be one owner?
Yes,
Is that the way
it's like the hash. Yeah.
No.
Well,
No. So that was interesting. I had a conversation with Steve Walbrow, who's the author of SANS 554, the smart contracts and crypto stuff
They have a
course.
class on
They do.
on what now?
On smart contracts, effectively blockchain.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Which
yeah,
Nifty-
I guess you could call that a smart contract.
Which Nifties are covered in the course.
It's a blockchain technology.
And
right? Yeah.
I was asking about some of the stuff, and it's interesting because the conversation went like this today. I'm like, well, all this art stuff. Like, if I make a picture and or if someone has a picture that's been niftied, I don't even know if that's the
Is
right
that a
word.
verb? Is it a verb?
It is now.
too? It is.
It is now.
Can I take a copy of that and then or if I go to some web page and there's a picture on it, I take it. Can I take it and nifty it and then sell it? But I can prove that it's the original because I just stole some random
How
image
could
off
you
of a
not?
web page, and I didn't get a direct answer on that. But the part that I did get was that Steve is also an artist and he has an album that he has released via Nifty. I'm like, oh, okay, tell me how that works. I'm like, so you can prove it and then you can sell one copy. And he says, no, there's a whole bunch of other different models that you can do, in that he can sell the rights, he can sell the Nifty. And if someone else chooses to sell it built within the smart contract, if someone else chooses to sell it, he automatically gets 12% of the.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
So it's like
because
a currency built into
there's royalties involved, and I'm like,
Well, yeah.
Didn't we already do this with the DMCA stuff and what the hell was the Blu-ray and like all the audio stuff that we did this?
Yeah,
DCSS.
so you're thinking of digital rights management, but you know, I
DRM,
think
yeah.
I think it is a really good application of blockchain. I mean,
Yeah.
I love what's evolving here. I think it's the right move, frankly, for a lot of these things, and the digital art stuff in particular that's come forward with blockchain signature. I think is fantastic.
The problem is that with like the crazy stuff that's going on with all of these big art stuff, there's clearly something amiss. Like, why would you pay $70 million for a collection of digital images?
I mean, art's always like that. People have been doing that forever. I mean, it's like people that, like, remember that Banksy painting, and like when they had it up for auction, like during the auction, it actually like shredded itself. And then people paid outrageous amounts of money for the shredded image. It's just because you want to show everybody you can do it. You want to own it. You want it to be yours. So I think that's like this Beeple thing with the cat meme, or whatever that cat thing is called.
Well, the people are stealing them too. So Nifty Gateway is a marketplace where you can buy, sell, and display digital items. And people basically had their accounts hacked into. And Nifty Gateway was like, no, it just enabled two-factor, back to our previous conversation, and it should be good. And people were like, I did have two-factor enabled, but my stuff still got stolen.
Wonder how that happened.
Let me guess, SMS.
Well, yeah, no, I was going to say, it's like we just read on the first story of the night, told you how to steal
There
it.
you go.
Now we're going to talk about what you need to
What
steal.
you want to steal is a 70.
Beautiful symmetry.
What did the first tweet go for by Jack Dorsey? I don't know. It was like
It
some
was
$20
ridiculous.
million.
Some crazy amount of money.
There's so much money laundering written all over this stuff that it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And sorry for plugging Steve's class.
No, it's fine.
The only
No,
reason,
I was-
and the only
and I
reason I
was-
had any of that is because Steve is one of the new authors with James and I on the IoT course.
Yeah. I was intrigued that you said there was a whole class on cryptocurrency or blockchain more
And
specifically.
smart contract.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And they call it smart contract.
Yep.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Can you start mining those blockchains and like
Ooh.
then
Own
brute
some-
forcing?
Yeah.
That's a great question.
Oh,
Well, I mean, you can't buy the new NVIDIA cards anyway, so it's kind of a moot point. So.
Yeah, you're not going to mine anything. You're not going to mine anything. Then.
And NVIDIA puts stuff in those cards so that you can't mine cryptocurrency.
Which,
with
as
them.
we were talking about on the way out of the show last week, somebody's already hacked
No, there's
that.
a beta driver that will get around that.
Yep.
Dude,
So,
it was like an it was like they invited.
Like-
It was like an announcement to
That's-
go, hey, we put this like roadblock in place, and we just want to see how much time it takes before someone either plows through it or goes around it.
Yeah.
so clearly
6 months
somebody
of
said,
development
challenge,
work and
game
$6
on,
million
challenge accepted.
and about
Yeah,
6
because
minutes.
it's there's a giant bag of money on the other side of this roadblock, so that's just inviting someone to go past the roadblock.
Pretty much. And there's a monetary incentive
Yes,
to
That's what I'm
do
saying.
this.
Yeah, there's a bag of money behind.
Absolutely.
He's got a comment in there somewhere, I think.
I was going to say, was it bring it or because they asked for it? Come on.
right?
I think that might have been a little bit of both, because I
Yeah.
heard something that along the lines of like NVIDIA ended up hacking it themselves.
No,
And-
they put out a beta driver that actually lets you get around it, and they were the ones that actually talked about how to get around it. There was an article.
after there were two researchers that broke it.
Yeah, I mean, somebody else broke it first, but then NVIDIA just basically said, okay, yeah.
But there was an AMD Radeon card that supposedly does a better job of mining cryptocurrency. Can you go buy that one and not the new RT?
Can you buy that one?
Can you buy that one?
At this point, I'll buy anything that's not sold out.
Or price
That's a valid
gouged.
point.
But that's the tricky thing is the card I talked about last week or the week before, right? I had bought for $180 and it was $588
Yeah, it's
for sale.
ridiculous.
You'll buy anything that's
Sick.
not sold out. I think I've got some like.
Well, it's not price gouging, yeah.
I mean, I think I've got some old like 6-year-old cards that I was doing Dogecoin mining on in the basement. And I'm like,
Well, there you go. We'll fire those babies up.
We touched on cryptography a little bit. Dawn of a new era, cryptography called quantum cryptography. This was an article that it attempted to explain quantum cryptography. I'll be honest, I still don't get it. I need to spend some more time with this article, but I also need someone like Jeff to read this article and tell me if it's actually worth spending more time with. I'm not sure if you read this one, Jeff, but it says, in the case of quantum cryptography, Alice tries to send photons, which are in a specific direction, to Bob. Bob places a filter in the middle, which is upward downward direction, so that the photon getting out of the filter are either in upward or downward direction only. Somehow from that, it derives the key, and Bob's able to decrypt it. Is that worth spending more time to understand it?
Jeff's reading story number 3. Jeff.
Huh?
Yeah, that was me, huh?
What?
Huh? I mean, it sounds like they're trying to describe the mechanics of how quantum computing works.
Yep.
Which I concede. It's it's got something to do with qubits.
Photons, man.
Photons.
Well, these are quantum photons.
Doug, I don't know if you read this one or not.
I mean, this is where they start to try to expand cryptography, and that's always been the sort of holy grail of getting to this, which makes you be able to create a much larger space for the hashes. And so essentially what they're doing with this is using it's not a Schrodinger.
They said it in the article.
It's this experiment where you split photons and they follow one path or the other. It's kind of weird thing, and they follow.
Yeah.
It's called a multi-slit experiment or something like that. And basically the photon has to choose
Heisenberg's uncertainty principle.
There you go, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle.
I read that from the article, by the way. I'm not that smart.
And the photon has to choose one slit or the other slit.
Yep.
And even though you can see it on both slits, it's like it's weird. It's where you start getting into this stuff where it's like, hand me the bong, and we'll talk about this. Like, oh wow, man, it went through both slits, but it only really went through one because there's just one photon, but it went through both sides, and oh my god. And this is that quantum stuff that they're starting to get into, and by doing that, you vastly increase the essentially key space of the cryptography, which means it's really, really tough to break. Now, someday somebody will break it because then you have a quantum computer and it'll break quantum cryptography. But yeah, so that's essentially what they're talking about.
So I can take a stab at
let
it.
Jeff have it now.
Please do, Jeff.
And maybe I won't do any better than Doug just did, but
well, thanks.
You know,
Welcome to Damning with Faint Praise Theater.
that came out wrong. Doug, you did an admirable job,
just
and
really
I
struck me
was
funny.
with you. Sorry.
Jeff just mad because Doug's smoking my cigars and not Jeff. And
This is the special shelf that says just for Jeff.
Fair enough. So there's two types. There's two major types of encryption algorithm out in the world, which we affectionately call symmetric and asymmetric. Asymmetric is also known.
You forgot Canada, asymmetric, eh?
It's symmetric.
Okay.
It's symmetric, eh?
Sorry.
It's symmetric A. That would be a third, but we're trying to explain a complicated concept. Shut up, Larry.
We just go to jokes.
Hey.
So, what quantum cryptography is promising to be able, well, quantum computing is promising to be able to do, is to solve public key cryptography, which involves a public and a private key. And the way it works simplistically is these two keys get multiplied together to form a very large number, and the whole strength of the cryptography is how hard it is to factor this very large number and get back to the actual numbers, which I believe are actually prime numbers. The unique ones that
very
are
very large prime numbers.
Very large prime numbers. So quantum computing. Not to begin to explain how it works, but it's magic. It's really fast, and it just solves the problem because of all the capability of doing advanced, fast computing with qubits. It makes that problem solvable. Now, the traditional type of cryptography using one key, however that's been generated, using some sort of algorithm, applying a random key to your message, to your data stream, whatever it is that you're trying to protect, it's solvable eventually, theoretically, because you can try all the combinations of keys. And again, they tend to be...
Just use the symmetric algorithm, right?
Where cryptography comes into play, and full disclosure, there's very, very few known attacks against all the famous actual cryptographic algorithms that we know of in the computer world. But throughout time, manual cryptosystems being the exception, but machine cryptography, which was what was in vogue when I was working for the government many years ago. But think Enigma machine. The belief that Enigma was unsolvable was because they were using all sorts of machines and rotors and made the possibility of brute forcing it such a huge problem to do by hand. They figured nobody could ever try all the combinations in their lifetime.
Right. But also there was no salt, right?
Shut up, Paul.
No, I'm serious.
Or is that a serious question?
No, it was a serious question because it was because as we said on the show before, right? The Germans put Heil Hitler after each message, and cryptographically that took the same, basically the space
same
of letters.
text.
Yeah, same encrypted text as it was plain text, right?
I apologize. Salting is something different, but what you're pointing out is cryptographic attacks tend to be exploiting. In that case, it was called known plain text.
Right.
You know what the underlying plain text is, and conveniently, it was the same plain text at the beginning of each message that they would send, even though each message was sent with a unique key, because the Enigma machine, every time it generated a key character, the rotors turned. But one of the other weaknesses of the Enigma machine, whether it had three rotors, is the first one would click one time, and I think it had 26 characters on it, the 26 characters of the alphabet, and it would therefore one revolution was 26 characters before the second one would click once. So that was once they figured that out, it became a little bit deterministic. Even though you didn't know what the order of the letters were on the rotors themselves. So we're getting too into the weeds.
Yeah, it's really that's deep. I like it though.
Quantum cryptography is breaking public key cryptography, which is what most of the internet is built on. All of our secure websites. But the trick is the handshake, the negotiation to all of our websites, or most of our websites, are secure these days. The initial handshake is what's doing the passing of a public and private key to establish a session key, which converts over to the symmetric encryption. So the actual encryption that's going on of your web pages is a symmetric algorithm, because it's so much faster than doing the public private pair. So the public and private is key though, because it's what starts it. So key exchange is the issue. So cryptographic attacks are very often not going after the algorithm itself. It's going after human errors or human tendencies. You mentioned the Heil Hitler. Password cracking is probably another great example, where let's say you're using a 20-character password and so it's 20 to the however many characters on your keyboard that are the possibility of all the characters. Huge number. But most people that are going to create a 20-character password that they want to try to remember are going to write down a phrase. And phrases use words, and don't quote me on the exact number, but even though there's millions of words in the English language, statistically we use like 80,000 words or something like that.
Password
so if you know that,
brute forcing or brute force guessing.
Well, it's not brute. It's brute forcing if you try every character. It's a cryptographic attack if you try to, instead of going after it character by character, guess the words.
Right.
Does that make sense?
The other reason I bring this up is because Jack Rosider did a great job he interviewed. He did 2 different episodes that kind of built upon each other. He talked to folks and did a lot of research on how the LinkedIn breach occurred. Basically, their passwords were hashed inside of the database. Your passwords were hashed. Your LinkedIn account's passwords were hashed inside of a database. The database was being traded on the dark web. They had to work backwards to derive how that happened. The Dutch, what is it? They call it like the old Dutch hacker group or something like that. Got a hold of the database and were brute force guessing the passwords. Since they weren't salted, I mean, it's like if one person's password is password, it looks like the same. It is the same hash in the database. Now you know all the other users whose passwords are password. They figured out in that exercise what some of the other passwords were. They then saw Donald Trump on the news and was like, hey, I wonder if we search this database for Trump.com, like whose passwords are in LinkedIn, figured out that one of those passwords was "you're fired," then said, hey, I wonder if the Twitter account for Donald Trump was "you're fired." And like basically the way they describe it, I'm spoiling the episode. You should still go listen to it because it's fascinating. But like one of the guys was like, yeah, so I like tried it. And the other guys were like, wait, you didn't actually like try and log in with Trump's thing? He's like, yeah, like I kind of did. And they're like, all right. But like it asked them to like validate an email address. And then the story kind of goes on how they basically had to stop and say, look, we can't do this disclosure with like, hey, we kind of half got into the Twitter account because no one's going to believe us or show interest. We got to pull off the rest of the hack and then do the disclosure. And so the rest of the story kind of continues from there. I won't spoil it because you absolutely should go listen to it. I thought they did a great job and Jack did a great job putting those episodes together and tying them together.
To your point, Paul, what you're describing, what they were describing is cryptanalysis. It's trying to figure out how to break the code, break the message by applying all sorts of tricks and looking for various weaknesses, not in the algorithm typically, but in the way the algorithm's been implemented, or correctly or incorrectly, or frankly stealing the key. I mean, the U.S. Suffered major breaches in terms of the intelligence community back throughout time, but sometime around when I was at NSA, so it would have been the 80s, there were some major espionage cases surfaced where people from NSA, people from CIA were essentially selling the keys to all of our great crypto systems. They sold it to the Russians, and the Russians could use the key and read all the messages.
Very much like the mom and daughter hacker duo that basically the way this plays out. So they hacked their way to the homecoming crown. So they rigged the election, fabricated votes so that her daughter could become homecoming queen. But really, like the air quotes hack, because I was like, oh, well, that's kind of interesting. Like there's a mom and daughter hacking duo. Like I'm intrigued for all kinds of reasons as to like how this all played out. But it turns out like it's not really hacking. Like her mom worked at the school, had valid credentials to access the system, similar to your story, Jeff, not at quite the scale, but shared the password with the username and password with the daughter, who would go in and like read people's grades and reports, rig the homecoming election purportedly, and do all of those things, and then brag about it to her friends, like, oh, like, hey, I like you got an F in math, like you must be really dumb, ha ha ha. That's kind of how I envisioned it playing out. But that was all because like her mom and her daughter shared the account that her mom had access. That's more insider threat than anything it is having to do with hacking.
And if the daughter was really smart, she would have been like, so you got an F in math, would you like to have an A?
Yeah. Pay me $500
Exactly.
and you can have an A.
Who cares about the damn homecoming queen crown, because I just bought a Maserati.
Right.
But yeah.
Yep. And to
the
this,
password was pencil and it was written down inside the desk.
On that. and to that, it's not a story in the wiki, but there was one that came out on national news this week about the 50-something-year-old momish that advanced her daughter's cheerleading career by creating deep fakes of 3 other members of the cheerleading squad showing that they were drinking naked and hitting the vape pen, and then sent them to like teachers and all that type of stuff.
Right. It's interesting. Is that fraud? Is that hacking? Is that
one? I'm impressed that
how do you categorize
that the mom knew how to and could create the deep fakes.
Yeah.
I'm also concerned that it's easy enough for someone of say
for a 50-year-old momish person to do.
Yeah.
That's more slander than digital slander. Is that a new thing? I mean,
digital or otherwise, it's still slander.
In this case, though,
I think it's safe to say the law has not caught up with that.
Yeah, to give it some, but like in this case, it's still a CFAA violation because it's unauthorized access, which is, I thought it was interesting to think about in that context that it's unauthorized access. That doesn't necessarily mean it was hacking. Like it wasn't, we got the password database and we're doing brute force guessing or the things we did as pen testers. Like basically unauthorized means like someone shared their password with someone and gained access to information in systems they did not have authorization to have access to.
I mean, this is back down in more like the category of, well, at least when I was in high school, somebody puts up a poster that says Britney's a slut.
Yeah. In Larry's example, that would
so
be
it's
more
slanderous. Defamation.
This case, in the homecoming case, it is, I think, more unauthorized access to computer systems, which interesting how we always kind of think of that as more hacking activities, but really it's just like mom shared her password with daughter, but like the list of charges against them.
Now, they took this very seriously.
Very seriously. Where are the list of charges?
I was just looking for that.
Yeah, so arrested 1 count each offenses against users of computers, computer systems, computer networks, and electronic devices, a 3rd-degree felony. Unlawful use of two-way communications device, also a 3rd-degree felony. Criminal use of personally identifiable information, yet another 3rd-degree felony. And conspiracy to commit these offenses because they work together with each other. They racked up a 1st-degree misdemeanor charge.
But to understand what's happening, though, and I think this is true, and quick plug for Security and Compliance Weekly. We had Priya Chaudhry on as our occasional co-host, and she happens to be a lawyer, and she schools us every time that she comes on law. But we were talking about the law as it applies to cybersecurity just this week. Episode, help me out, people whispering in my ears, 65, I think it was.
I think it was 65.
She was talking about how
65.
Thank you. 65 it is. The law historically, before you got into cyber law, is always backwards looking. It's always based on, precedents and somebody interpreting the law and applying it and making it stick, so to speak. And cyber law, because things are happening so quickly and things are so different, like what we're describing here, I would wager, and we can check with Priya. Should have her on this show sometime.
We should.
That all these charges are being thrown at these people more or less to see what will stick, because probably a case like this has never happened before. So, somebody sat down and said, well, let's see what kind of sort of thing might apply here, and let's charge them with it, and then let's let a judge and a jury figure it out. And based on the outcome of that case, the next time it happens, there'll be precedent, and if they decided it's bad and they convict them, then from here on out, people will get convicted for that. So it's tricky, though. But the best analogy that I can think of, or the closest analogy I can think of, is the old question of, if you are, walk up to somebody's house and the door is open and you walk inside, are you trespassing? it's kind of along those lines.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting if you start to read about what third-degree felonies are compared to
Well,
other
it's really, I mean, all these,
felonies.
I have a student right now I'm working with who's doing her thesis, and she's a law student, and she's doing her thesis on these laws at the state level. And, every state has different laws. All the laws are complicated. A lot of them haven't been tested in court. So like Jeff was saying, these things will become precedents as cases are tried, and then the court will say yes or no to different charges. So it's a huge issue, and I mean, there's a lot of discussion about this, I think, in the legal community getting ready to start.
Right.
So, I have several lawyers that are working on this thesis with us as well to put together all these laws and try to sort of start seeing where they have commonality and where they vary. They probably could get charged in these cases under some of these cyber stalking and revenge porn. A lot of states now have cyber stalking and revenge porn laws that are pretty broad as well. So they may be able to charge them under those kind of statutes as well, but they typically are going to choose the statute that has the most penalty associated with it that they think they can get a conviction on. So that's where they sort of pick, from the different rules.
Lee, you and I had a few stories in common.
Yeah.
One was the new Marai, resurgence of Marai.
It's a resurgence.
I don't know, a variant. I don't know if it's a
It's a
variant.
variant.
It's a variant.
An evolution or an
We can call it a variant.
Yeah, a variant.
They're calling it a variant, but
It's the Brazil variant.
right. The ZH trap botnet. It basically, it's it's targeting. What was it targeting?
D-Link,
Firewalls,
Netgear,
VPN.
D-Link, Netgear, Sonic Wall, and a bunch of IoT stuff.
Well, the ZH trap was just that. It was a trap, right? Like the botnet people set up some honeypots, but it was like the bad hacker set up the honeypots, and when stuff hit the honeypots, they went after the bots that were attacking the honeypot and went after their C2 infrastructure.
Right.
It took over their C2 infrastructure to increase the size of their botnet. Is that what your story was about, Lee?
Yeah, it was basically the same thing, although it was focused on the one I got was focused more on the hey, it's back, and also known as the H. And yours was, and it mentions that yours is going more straight into what they're going after. But it's the same net.
Apparently, there was some new remote code execution exploits in the story. I don't know which number mine was, but the part that I thought was interesting, Lee, is they're going after new targets with some new exploits, and researchers could see like the new exploits going after these devices, but couldn't figure out a corresponding vulnerability. So they're thinking they're new vulnerabilities, zero-day vulnerabilities and zero-day exploits, but they're having to work backwards and figure it out.
Right, because some of them were going after 0 days, and some of them were going after things that have had patches for years. I remember that both mentioned 0 days, and then yours talks about, hey, wait, there's been a patch out for some of the stuff for over a year. What the hell, guys?
Yeah, there's that too.
Darn it! Come on, guys. But no, it was interesting. I thought didn't Marai shut down like last fall or something?
Well, it's a great point, Lee. Like they do shut these down, and then they just come back. And I thought, this kind of, if you're going to bring back a botnet, what better way than to take over someone else's C2 infrastructure and introduce some new zero-day exploits into some existing, malware and botnet code to kind of bring it back to life.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly, it's a fruitful endeavor to go after IoT devices and build a botnet.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, they're used for quite a few things.
A lot of wiggle room.
Bag of tricks they had, Tyler, right?
Yeah.
And some of these guys, they shut down, and they after they shut down, they release their source to whatever others, so then they can build on it from there and make something that fingerprints or doesn't fingerprint the same, but it's really a lot of the same code on the bottom, saving a lot of time.
I think the infrastructure was fully confiscated and taken down by an effort of some working groups in Microsoft and other.
Wasn't that one of those
corporations.
multinational law enforcement cooperation things?
Yep.
Microsoft's instrumental in taking some of those things down.
Yeah, because they're running on Azure and other platforms that they control.
Well, and most people run Windows, so if there's a botnet, it's going to target Windows. So the less botnets that are targeting Windows and making Microsoft look bad, that's clever.
DNS.
Yep.
I have no objection to Microsoft stepping up their game to get
I
these
agree.
things caught and shut down. I mean, what the heck? It's got to be done. And the fact that they're sharing and they're creating tools that they're putting out PowerShell scripts and stuff.
Yeah.
Going back to last week's Conversational Exchange, they published a couple of tools just that are out there and free for people to use.
Yep.
The other one we had in common was hackers hide credit card data in compromised stores in a JPEG file.
So I was
a PCI
thinking
story.
that's Stego and PCI, right, Jeff?
Yeah, it sounds
not new,
it's
but
well, it's not a new concept, but certainly an interesting application of, how do you hide the goods so you can exfiltrate it?
Yep.
And what better way than to just put it up on their website in a JPEG? That was kind of clever. I was trying to check our archive, because it's all based on MageCart type of attacks. Website skimming is what they call it. And I was like, gee, have we ever talked about website skimming in MageCart on any of our episodes? And I did. I just typed in MageCart.
I'm sure we did.
Episodes like 575, 576 showed up. So if we have, it's been a while, like a couple years.
I think we should dig into carding.
We should.
It's kind of funny. My wife will go, we want to go karting, and use the word karting, and what she means is like go ride like go-karts or go to like a place. So like, look, this family will not be involved in illegal or illicit credit card trade. And they all just kind of look at me. I'm like, you said karting. That's the term that refers to trading and buying and selling credit cards and gear and devices. I'm like, are we going to use track 1 or track 2 data? Like, what are we getting from this carding experience? And I kind of look at me like I have 8 heads.
Hey, Alexa, earmuffs.
Yeah.
So to me, the cool thing about hiding the data in the JPEGs is that like they're really making it invisible that they're there, because they're not doing the direct data exfil, and then they could come along later and pick up a JPEG and pull it out and look possibly like somebody who's just legitimately opening an image. It's not. It's gonna be a lot harder to find it.
Well, like my thing was like, you're putting these images somewhere. You have to go get them, but are they like images that aren't part of your website? And how my brain went to like, well, how do I monitor what images are being downloaded from my website? And I'm like, oh yeah, wait,
not even just download it. Like you can right click on an image, right? You save that out. It's these in this case are publicly posted images or public paths.
Yes.
So they can just retrieve them from anonymous sources.
So my question was, did they try to obfuscate the data in any way?
It was in the metadata.
It's just written. I'm assuming it's in the metadata. I was trying to read.
I want to scan the internet and look for these JPEGs now and start looking at the metadata.
Or are they steganography?
Yeah. The other part that
right.
I don't. It didn't. It's rarely that clever that it would be actual steganography. I think they just figured out how to tag it in
metadata.
It's in metadata. Okay.
But what's interesting about it is e-commerce sites very often, are selling things, and they're selling things based on a catalog, let's say, and the catalog has pictures of all the stuff that you want to buy. So it's very common for these types of e-commerce sites. Now, usually they're in theory segmented out from the payment application portion of things, but it's very common for these websites to have connections to FTP servers. One of the banes of my existence, because they're always pushing content out. I think I can say this. My customer many years ago was 1-800-Flowers. Go look at their website sometime and see how many flower arrangements they offer, especially on like Valentine's Day.
Tons of images.
They're always pushing stuff. I mean, it's multiple times a day they're pushing out lots and lots of images. So, kudos for somebody figuring out, hey, we could hide things in images.
Noise,
tons of images. And ironically, they've probably, the bad guys have had to do that because of PCI that actually does require you to filter outbound connections and control access outbound. 15 years ago, when it was Alberto Gonzalez, they were dumping all the data into files and just leaving it there and then going and picking it up. Or they were pushing it out.
But now, there's a lot of systems, Jeff, that look inside of files and look for credit card numbers.
Yep.
And so hiding it in the metadata of an image kind of sidesteps that process. It's pretty smart.
Yep.
And I mean, kudos to you if you want to download every image on the internet and look through the metadata for credit card numbers.
Hell,
Have fun with that, Tom.
I had a hard
find
enough
amusing,
time.
though, is how lame it is because most file image formats, JPEG, PNG, they consist of chunks of data that are well defined, and it would be pretty easy to take a couple of bits of each chunk of data and encode your stuff into
Steganography.
Yeah, for the win.
Yeah, and do some sort of stag, but to stick it in the metadata, it's like that's like scripting crap.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
This is version 1.0, Joff. This is the
This
first
is why we scoff when they call these attacks sophisticated.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, it is, and it also is a topic that's been interesting to me lately. So I'll leave it at that.
Scraping all the images on the internet, like Jesus. I had a hard enough time just doing it from one website for Twitter picture sharing back in the day.
Speaking of which, do any of you guys have a card reader?
What kind of card reader?
Yeah, track 1, track 2, reader, writer.
You got
Writer? Yeah, we have
Yeah.
a writer and a reader.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
just
Bob,
need a
our
reader.
friend Bob has a writer and a reader.
Yeah, or
He knows
Tyler will
somebody
talk
with a
off
reader.
air momentarily.
we may have there may be access to one.
Okay.
I just need to have somebody swipe a card and tell me what they're looking at. I'll talk about it off air.
Just swipe a card.
Oh yeah, readers are get readers anywhere.
I just don't happen to have one. And I figured somebody would.
Writers, you got to go to 1-800-Carter's Market.
I'll get it right after I get that.
Instead of 1-800-Flowers, it's 1-800-Carter's Market.
It's on my wish list right after a printer, Larry.
Right after a printer. God,
Which I don't need now, but because I figured out I can scan right onto a USB stick. It's a little bit more painful, but it saves me from having to go out and get a new printer.
That's what she said.
Because I'm cheap.
You could probably also fax yourself a copy.
Yeah.
If it was connected to a phone line, I could. But yes. Anyway, move on. Oh, let me throw out a story. Let's shift gears completely. I just happened to hear this morning on the news, and since you guys are kind of close to Boston, I thought you guys would appreciate it. It's just such a touching story. My story, I think it's number 1, wherever it is.
Yeah.
Your story number 2 is not touching. The disaster of the Hafnium attack on Microsoft Exchange.
No, not that one.
Definitely not that one.
Story number 2.
It's the Dick Hoyt story.
No, Dick Hoyt, who I used to spend a lot of time in the Boston area with a prior customer. I spent months in the Boston area over the span of 5 or 6 years, and so I was up on many occasions during the time of the Boston Marathon. I was actually up there the year that the bombing happened, but so I heard about this guy probably 10 or 15 years ago, Dick Hoyt. If you're ever down on your luck, if you're ever feeling like you need some inspiration, this guy not only did marathons and Ironman competitions, he pushed his quadriplegic son on a wheelchair to do all these
or pulled him in a boat or while he swam. And the first race that they ever ran, folks fully expected him, it was the Boston Marathon, fully expected him to go down the first block and turn around and be done. No, he finished the entire goddamn thing and finished second to last.
Yep.
Not last, second last. Yep.
Yeah, they were interviewing his son this morning. So, he passed away. I think the last Boston Marathon he did was a year or two after the bombing. Yeah, and
my bad. The first one was not the Boston Marathon. It was a 5-mile race. But
that's right.
And by the way,
just an amazing story.
Little tangent on that story. If you ever have the pleasure to take a tour of the J. Edgar Hoover FBI building in D.C., the boat is there.
Yes.
Oh, cool.
Yes. The boat that they shot up.
Yeah, if you ever need motivation, and Joff isn't available because he's been killing it working out this year, getting in shape and getting his guns in order, just read up on Dick Hoyt.
Dick Hoyt.
Story.
It's actually funny you mentioned that also, Jeff, because the Dick Hoyt story came up in my coached workout group just this past week. So interesting how things converge. So.
It makes me feel like I should go walk around the block or something. For starters.
It's good. Good.
I'm just going
motivation.
to settle for getting out of my chair. So
Or at least walk to the cabin, Jeff, and have a cigar while you're down.
yeah,
That's right. That's right.
Yep. Exercise your lungs a little bit.
Let's talk about software grades. Why not? So the White House is contemplating
D minus.
The White House is contemplating the use of cybersecurity ratings and standards for U.S. software. A move akin to how New York City grades restaurants on sanitation, or Singapore labels Internet of Things devices. I mean, there's challenges here. The rating has to be based on something that can be measured, because you can measure things like the number of germs and bacteria in a kitchen, like using
And the
like,
number of rat feces. And,
right,
Yep.
because that's
people
like,
sleeping under the sink. One of my favorite
right?
restaurants.
Because that's
I
like
always think that-
science, right? Like there is a person
There's a
sleeping under
person
the
sleeping under the sink.
There is,
Yep.
however many particles of bacteria on
the
this.
person and
Right.
the sink
Yes.
and the food and yeah.
But how do you measure whether or not software is secure? Like, I think if there was a scientific and accurate way to do this, we wouldn't
already
be
be
having
doing
this
it,
conversation right now at all. Like, there's software changes. It has multiple components that change. It behaves differently in different environments. It can be manipulated on the client and the server. Like, authentication is a huge issue. Like, it's just not the same thing as you walk into a restaurant and there's like an A- on the wall, and you're like, it's not an A+, but like it's good enough, right? That doesn't exist for software. Like what's the grade? It's like I don't know. Like, does it have cross-site scripting? Like, that's
no,
one thing.
no, it has a grade, but that was tested 3 versions ago, and we haven't done our random test yet.
Yeah.
And like,
I mean, I guess a kitchen is the same way. Like, inspector's coming. We better like.
Well,
wipe
yeah,
the whole
the
place
guy's
out.
not sleeping here tonight.
Yeah,
'cause
kick him
it's-
out. Kick the guy into the sink
yeah,
out.
but also they do random inspections.
Yes,
and
true.
you're supposed to
But I
have
mean,
a certain level of hygiene.
but you could come up with a set of things that are about software that just like threat vectors, and you say, does this software have two-factor authentication? Does this software have? And so you can come up. I mean, it's not scientific, but you can start sort of scoring it based on criteria that exist. It's challenging, and like you said, if it was easy, it would already be done. But I mean, I do think they can come up with things where it says, well, this is all self-contained. It can't be modified. Does it have root passwords hard-coded into it and things like that? So there are things where you could give it, check marks and minus marks just like you do the restaurant. But they're going to have to sit down and come up with what all those things are. So that's for like a NIST problem. And they're going to sit down and say, okay, here's this giant checklist. And we say, how many check marks did you get?
I guess, my fear is you don't know the true security integrity of a web application, for example, until like you've got Burp Suite as a proxy and you're looking at, for example, like what code's loaded in my browser that I can control versus what's coming on the server side. Because you can do a scan and provide grades and detect vulnerabilities, and you can look at source code. But I think a huge part of web application security, which is really kind of telling for me in the last couple of like web apps that I looked at, was I'm not even attacking like the app in a traditional sense. Like, I'm not throwing packets at it or exploits or SQL injection. I'm just like, I'm looking at the requests and responses, and if it's loaded in my browser, I get to determine whether or not that's loaded in the browser. Like, I love the checkbox in Burp that's like, hey, basically take out any JavaScript or HTML that's doing field level validation. And by the way, if there's a hidden field, like, show that to me.
I think you're overthinking it, though. I
Logic
think
errors.
Logic errors are huge, but that's huge.
But I think you're overthinking
that's
it.
the difference between getting a vaccine and not, is what I'm
But
saying.
I think
though.
they're going to look at this at the gross level. So it's like, do you do like ridiculous things like, it has no password and, anybody can use it anonymously versus it, requires a login, requires two-factor. I think you're getting, there's no way they're going to be able to get down to that level because it changes and it's going to be impossible to measure. So I think it's going to end up being this sort of gross measurement of like, not like they tested for bacteria on the workplace. They're going to walk in and go, was there a guy sleeping under the sink? And if there's a guy sleeping under the sink, they go, that's not so great.
Yeah, there's levels and then there's levels.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking you're going to have what amounts to an approved config or validated configuration. You'll get the A if you've installed it with this way with this configuration, kind of like a standard OS configuration that you can validate. And then how often do you have to go update it and make sure you're still and A.
Yeah.
It
Maybe
seems
they'll
like
score it
there's a
over
slippery
time
slope.
even and say how many times was it patched in the last 6 months or something like that. But I think it'll stay at that kind of like macro level, and they probably won't drill down.
And then we think about the IoT stuff, and part of the thing that I've fallen into over the number of years is that we think about this IoT stuff with running a stripped down version of Linux, and that's not always the case. I mean, there's hundreds of different devices running some real-time operating system, like Paul, you and I favorite during back in the day was QNX.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's still tons of these devices running RTOS, and testing those is a different challenge altogether.
Yeah, and a lot of that testing, Larry, as you and I and many of us know, comes down to the authentication. And if we could only have a standard for how we authenticate to even web applications and IoT devices, or how you implement a registration system. Like, there could be standards. Like, never do validation within JavaScript in the browser, because that's out of your control now.
Yep.
Always have strong authentication and have password recovery be at a certain level, and have that be not something that developer needs to worry about. Have that be something you can just go buy and plug in. Bot detection, I think, should be the same thing. Have easy pluggable bot detection that brings that application up to a certain standard. What we have today, everyone gets to do whatever the heck they want in every single scenario, no matter if I'm if I'm ordering my dinner, registering for a vaccine, or doing banking. It's up to whomever to determine what level of security gets put in place in all those areas. That's where I can see legislation, but also assistance for places like state and municipal governments, which often have to operate this software to serve the community, to register your car, to pay your taxes, to do all of the things that every municipality has to do. That's at a significant disadvantage today. They're not a company that is taking on funding or doing business with companies that are taking on millions of dollars of funding. They're a municipality that's operating with a very small, if non-existent, budget for technology. And I think we do need a software grade, but also coming with that is some help and assistance for those to get certain organizations like municipalities up to a certain level.
Well, I think you're going to need another piece, though. I think having better assurance about what the software is you're requiring and a secure way to configure it is important. But I think you're going to still have to have detection for malfeasance. You're going to have, because things can go wrong before the grade is updated or the configuration is changed, because say they were acquired by somebody who doesn't have our best interest at heart or something else. You got to have an additional level there to watch out for what's going on that shouldn't be.
There's it's also the issue, Lee, of how long do we require that software that's deployed meet that standard? I think it certainly plays into OT as well. How long does a device that's deployed in the field have to be maintained to a certain standard? As evidenced by my story number 13, Schneider Electric's power. Where did Tyler go? Tyler? Okay, we'll get to that one next. Maybe take a different direction as Tyler comes back, because I wanted to get his take on that one.
There
he is.
Yeah. So
Might have gone to grab his card reader.
I was pivoting to my story number 13, Schneider Electric's Power Logic Ion PM smart meter, used by consumers in their homes. Interesting enough, we just got these inroad. Not this particular device. I haven't actually looked. They deploy the meters to monitor and, of course, bill their customers for services used by industrial companies and data centers. Had some pretty heinous vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, it looked like a logic error to me. I mean, it was, what happens is that it uses a proprietary protocol. So
with no authentication.
No.
As is the case oftentimes in OT.
So
authentication just gets in the way.
They're just sending this stuff over this proprietary thing that's called ION or something like that. And what happens is when they evaluate the packet, there's two tests that go on. So there's a test to see if the packet is valid, and there's a test to see if you should put it on the stack. And even when it got an error for the packet being malformed, it still pushed the packet up onto the stack. So it created a situation where malformed traffic could get into the stack, which ended up one of those ended up being a remote code execution problem, and the other one was just a denial of service. So it depended on how the stack was handling these malformed packets. And in one case, it was actually they were able to link. I'm presuming it didn't actually go into exactly
details,
how they did it, but I'm presuming again it's linking those stack instructions together so that you can pull in whatever you want, and then the other case it just fried it, so it reboots and starts over. So it's pretty bad. I mean these are like IoT devices and things like that. So
well, and smart meters are interesting too because they need to communicate, right? Tyler and Larry,
they do.
I don't want to give away too much, but if you were to look at one of those devices, you would see that it has to communicate that data back from a person's home to some regional point, maybe not a central point, right? But a collection center. And how do you transmit that data, but do it securely, but also do it so that it's reliable as well?
There's a number of ways you can do
But you
that.
said securable, right? Like securable.
Right. There's a patch.
May not happen.
Securable, right?
Yep.
I mean, I don't necessarily see the wire from my smart meter that goes somewhere.
Exactly. Well, but no, you do. Because the power line. Because you can do Ethernet over power line.
Gotcha.
You can do that type of stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's also all sorts of other methods too. The trick really becomes doing that securely. Because from something like your power meter, your car, any of these things, doing so securely today may be possible. The problem is that the lead time for development and then push to market for automobiles, smart meter solutions,
And getting those installed.
3 to 5 years.
Yep.
Lead time before the first one even gets installed. It may be secure the day that it's rolled out, but you think about from the power perspective, the power meter is expected to live on someone's home for 30 years.
Yep.
Your automobile is going to be potentially up and running for how long? Maybe 20 years? 15 years?
Yeah.
That technology that was secure the day that it was installed, after 5 years is likely not secure anymore.
Correct.
And a lot of these rely on like the real time. They have to have. In this case, I don't see some of the need, but a lot of these ICS devices or real-time operating systems are relying on the fact that they need to have accurate measurements, calculate, change real hardware on an instant in order to, calculate change of phase, send a voltage or current or amperage down the line or up or down something, right? Something physical. And so there's not a lot of room for heavy encryption to be decrypted, taken apart on like low-end devices, as well as the speed, time, and reliability that has to happen. So again, like we think of encryption, like why wouldn't they just put encryption on this? It doesn't actually work that way in a lot of ICS environments, and there's usually a decent reason. Like there are some times that, they've been trying to develop these and make these more efficient, more easily available to process and decrypt and handle different protocols, which is why you'll typically see a proprietary protocol on theirs, because they've specifically designed a chip that does a specific function utilizing their protocol in a specific manner. You start to muck with their
speed.
Proprietary is always secure.
And
so
its speed.
Why are we having a discussion?
I think the other one that hits on that Tyler is, we have this quote, the triad of CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And that's sort of what we've taken as gospel in the IT security community. In OT networks, ICS networks, it's not in that order. And
it's availability first, because the power company has to collect the data to send me a bill.
Right.
And the power has
even
to be
further
there.
Safety.
Keep the lights on.
Safety. Availability.
Gotta keep the lights on
availability
first.
for that system to be able to know if it needs to shut down because there's a safety issue. That's the primary key, not this confidentiality business. And in many cases, the confidentiality takes away from the processing power needed to assure availability.
I would even say that the integrity isn't as important, because what they'll do if there's a glitch, they'll just bill you again for the same amount from last month.
Yep.
Well, also, I think it's like loss prevention in retail. You know, they may know that, sure, if I deploy a smart meter to Larry's house, yeah, Larry can certainly reverse engineer any IoT embedded device and cheat on his bill. But look at the risk equation there, right? Like, first, someone has to have the right skills. Secondly, someone has to be unethical to want to lie about their bill. And the number of instances where that's going to happen, the probability is pretty low. So, therefore, we can put a device in that maybe doesn't have that confidentiality, doesn't have some of those measures.
The amount we're going to spend to implement that, and the money we're going to lose for that one person out of a population is going to be minimal. And if that one person does build a device that they start distributing to their friends, we have enough data across this huge swath that we can detect those anomalies, and then we can just go.
You do the detection phase, rather than a protection phase.
Exactly. Exactly. So, and there are articles of that happen. I mean, I remember hearing from some folks, friends of ours, that in Puerto Rico that exactly happened.
Right. Yeah, I want to say 10 years ago, I started hearing about smart meter deployment and how they're deployed.
Yep.
And a couple of months ago, I got a smart meter. Speaking to your point, Larry, of it takes time to identify the right technology, develop it, get the processes and equipment in place, and then start deploying it to. You have to deploy this to every home in the environment.
We actually, so our house, when we built our new house, we got, when they put the new meter on the new house,
they put
we
a
got
new
this
smart meter.
And our barn has a separate service, and we actually just got one there about 6 months or so, 8 months ago.
Maybe mine was, and I think in Rhode Island, National Grid, I mean, you could go look that up, is the provider for Rhode Island and a lot of New England, right? I think they're just now getting to rolling those out to homes.
And the other one too, I think ours was a little bit anomalous in that it was for our barn, and we used about $12 a month in electricity in our barn for the workshop and so forth. And we plugged our camper into the barn and the refrigerator and stuff. So now it's about $26 a month for the energy draw there. But about 6 years ago, I also made a mistake in that we had two bills for our energy consumption. And I accidentally paid the house payment to the barn 3 consecutive months in a row, totaling almost $1,000. So I had $1,000 credit the energy company for a meter that we were using at $12 a month. And then all of a sudden it's like, holy crap, they're using energy.
Yeah, exactly.
Wait, the meter's broken.
Right. So they do pay attention to the bill.
I would venture to guess that they do. So.
It's interesting.
And we also had to jump, nearly triple in what our energy consumption was for plugging the camper into the garage, in the barn. So.
Do you guys follow Paranoid Ninja on Twitter? Tyler, I know you do.
Yes.
Yeah, that was an interesting. I'm still curious what happened there.
Yeah.
Well, I know what happened, but
I mean, this kind of
falls
on
what he did about it.
This falls on our mantra of don't crap on security researchers. And I know, Tyler, I know you follow Paranoid Ninja, so I will immediately side with Paranoid Ninja on this. And Paranoid Ninja,
your story number
19.
Okay.
Basically made a post that was like, look, I found some O-Day in 0365 waiting on Microsoft to confirm whether it's a duplicate or not. Another site, security newspaper, which I had not heard of, kind of poo-pooed on Paranoid Ninja, saying Paranoid Ninja's ensuring that cyber criminal groups use these vulnerabilities to organize malicious campaigns aimed at users of this suite. And
what the hell?
When I look at Paranoid Ninja, that person has pretty good track record, Tyler, right, of responsible disclosure with Microsoft. So
very, very good track record. That is probably not someone you want to take down that track. I mean, we get back into the whole argument that happens there. Mass media doesn't understand this, but B, you even have people in our community that get pissed off on tool releasing and vulnerability disclosure and POC. This is an ongoing conversation. There's a lot of people that are going to be on both sides of the fence, and you can see the argument from both sides. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to fundamental beliefs on how you think things need to get better. So I probably won't take a stance here just because I have respect for both people on both sides and see a lot of point of views. I just don't see the media being able to commentary on this, especially in that way, without knowing how this happens.
I agree. Also, I will comment and say that I lean on the side of information wants to be free. I do believe in responsible disclosure, but I also kind of err on the side of it's better if we all know about it versus if only the bad actors know about it and the vendor knows about it and hasn't fixed it. And we've seen those situations happen more often than not. And I've always been on the side of, look, level the playing field. We should all know about it because at the end of the day, blue teams are creative hackers like a lot of us. And they can come up with creative solutions. Like even if there's no patch, knowing about it, I think levels that playing field.
Yeah. And I mean, I want to know about it. I mean, I want to be able to deal with this and not you go, oh, yeah, if we tell people, then they'll just exploit it. I'm like, that's fine, but if you tell me I can stop them from exploiting it, I can block those damn ports before they come exploit me because I didn't even know about the thing.
I can make that decision for my environment.
Somebody will find out. I mean, somebody's going to discover.
We'll exploit it eventually.
Yep, and they're going to find it.
Or not.
Well, and so the Microsoft's thing of taking down the GitHub. Like I understand, okay, you control GitHub's platform. But at the end of the day, like,
what's the point?
It's out there.
It's already out there. It took me 2 seconds to get it later because somebody said, "Do you have a copy of this?" It was like, "Well, GitHub took it down, but oh yeah, there it is." And it literally, it was just the very first thing in the search. So I'm like, so taking down the GitHub, what did that accomplish?
All that accomplishes people are going to put exploits somewhere else and not on GitHub. And there's dozens of. I follow a lot of the feeds.
You really
that produce exploits.
You got to embrace this stuff and tell everybody about it and say, "Hey, let's fix this together."
You got to own it.
You got to own it.
Boom. Boom.
Don't forget to tip your servers.
Oh, boy. Oh, and people are owning it, man. I want to give props to the team over at Grim, grim-co.com. And I want to tell you what, Bryson's company, right?
Yep.
They do not post a whole lot of blogs. But when they do, man, this one was a home run in particular. This was my favorite article of the week. And I mean, they're looking at Linux kernel code. And look, Linux kernel code is not for the faint of heart. It's not a lot of people on this planet that can write Linux kernel code. They can read Linux kernel code. It is a small minority of people that can read that code, understand it well enough to then point out vulnerabilities in it, but then also explain it and write exploits for it. Like, this is really serious tradecraft.
Grim is definitely a prime candidate to do this level of work and level of exploitation.
But also explain it. I mean, also explain it in a way, like, even if you don't understand all of the details, which arguably takes more time than just a cursory read, which this was just breaking this week. We were talking about it in our webcast today with Adrian Sanabria and Brandon from Capsulate. And we all had we didn't get a chance to even put it in the slides because we're still trying to understand it. But like, basically, it was funny, Doug. You and I were talking about SCSI because we were talking about a couple of weeks ago about storage. And I'm like, oh yeah, like there used to be SCSI, and I used to have was it a SCSI card? Mm-hmm. Right?
It was.
Also supported RAID.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
We're talking about like old school storage.
Uh-huh.
But the Linux kernel still supports SCSI.
Of course.
But what we agreed upon on the webcast today was it was more for iSCSI, which is basically SCSI over TCP. And sort of. That's how the article described it. So I'll go with that. They didn't go with a huge... Their whole point of the article was you can force the Linux kernel to dynamically load a module for SCSI that then contains, I think, more than one vulnerability that you can exploit. And it's not just... Because I would read that at first and go... Okay, that means I've got an old 486 that's running a SCSI card or something like that, right? That's not what they're saying. Is iSCSI kind of brought that to modern kernels, but there's all kinds of packages you can load that then, as a dependency, they're loading the SCSI driver, and therefore it has a vulnerability, and they exploited it. On-demand kernel module loading, which you can prevent with GR security. Brad Spengler's quoted in this article, or mentioned in this article as well. And you can prevent some of that. But just a fantastic write-up.
No, that's
research.
it's an amazing. Yeah, I mean, it's awesome.
When I was looking at this the other day, and I was thinking, how many of us realize that you can load kernel modules as a regular user? You don't have to be admin, and that really you can lock down what kernel modules you are and aren't loading.
You can, yeah.
And I was just like, wait, what?
We talked about this today in the webcast, Lee. We talked about user privileges because we think of user versus root, but in Linux you can get so much more granular. I identified 3 different ways: seccomp, which governs system calls; Linux capabilities, which the capabilities really speak to this one because I can grant a process the capabilities to load kernel modules, for example. And then we talked about app armor. And how app armor is more like a sandboxy, more firewall kind of way to restrict a process that's done at boot time, where capabilities can be done on the fly, and seccomp governs syscalls. But all of these are basically like different ways to govern privileges within a Linux system, and how complex that all becomes when you have all 3 of these mechanisms plus the standard kind of PAM privileges, within Linux, and how all of these things interact, and it kind of ties together with new old bugs in Linux kernel from Grim. Awesome.
I had actually come across a different way to thwart it, and that is you can use the mod conf, and you can not only unload a module, but you can change the load action on a module to like bin false, so it just fails to load everything if you get end run. Although I think your stuff's a little sexier and possibly more thorough. I was going for down and dirty and gritty.
Pentest Academy, to your point, where a regular user can load kernel modules, one of their container escapes is you load a kernel module that shovels a root shell back to you. And it kind of just like blows your mind of the way privileges are controlled, air quotes controlled, within Linux, and it's kind of scary.
Well, I think the original assumption was that people couldn't get to that stuff. So I mean, so it was very difficult to get to it because that was that idea of physical security is locked in a vault somewhere.
Right.
And if you can get to that level, you can literally cause it to do just about anything. So you can recompile the kernel if you want to and add whatever you want into it.
What is this, Gen 2?
Yeah, we talked about that. We're like, and the answer to a lot of this stuff is you need to compile everything by hand in Gen 2.
And understand it.
So that you tightly control the security of your system. Again, I think there's not a whole lot of people in the world. Like, that's a pretty short list of people that can do
even
that.
People that can do it don't have time to do it.
Or don't want to do it, right?
Well, yeah.
You may have the skills to be able to do it, but like, do you really want to do that? So what you do is you trust it to the distributions to be able to configure that stuff for you. But also keep in mind, what I brought up today in the webcast was the distributions want as many people as possible to use their distribution. So they're trying to make a larger feature set available for all of us. All the stuff works and gives you the capabilities, not capabilities in the kernel sense, but capabilities to support all kinds of things if you need or want to, therefore opening up potentially attack surface. Also, each distribution may customize a patch or a fix. They may see that version 2.0 is coming down, they're running version 1, but I just want the security fix from 2.0, so I'm going to backport that into version 1, roll that out as a security fix, but not do all the regression testing against everything in 2.0. So did I just introduce more vulnerabilities? Did I introduce a new vulnerability? Did I change the way that vulnerability is exploited? Like, all this stuff in Linux it's just so fascinating to me, but also scary, the amount of attack surface that we have inside of Linux.
And increasing all the time.
Do you remember when we first started playing with Linux in 94, 95, and in order to do these kind of things, you had to recompile the kernel?
All the time I would recompile the kernel.
And when they got those old loadable drivers, holy crap, was that cool or what?
Right. So you didn't have to recompile your kernel.
Yep.
Oh.
And now Apple took that away from us, kernel extensions.
And Apple was a BSD kernel, which also had loadable extensions, similar model, but completely different code base, right?
Right.
Craziness.
Yeah. Great stuff.
But cool.
But really cool stuff. Also, Lee, I don't know if you have supercomputers that you've come across in your time. It's something like 90% of the supercomputers in the world run Linux.
Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Because of the flexibility.
Yeah, had to
the
look that up.
drivers and stuff. But they're not running Red Hat or something off the shelf.
No.
It's custom.
It's all. Like,
I mean, they may have started with one of the standard distributions, but then they did a bunch to it. They originally were running proprietary OSs. And that's why I think a couple shows ago I mentioned NLTSS, the National Lab Time Sharing Service. It was a supercomputer OS that was written at Livermore at the time. And it was a pain in the ass to get it working and going. And you get a machine, all it could run is the benchmark. Now you get a machine, it's an actually functional machine with Linux on it.
Right.
Yeah, what you said. So it's Linux is like amazing. The hell with the Java enabled ring, a Linux enabled ring, right?
Nice.
Oh, this was interesting. So, a dumb mistake exposed Iranian hackers behind fake Proud Boys U.S. election emails. I have to say, it was kind of, even I was a little ignorant as to how much nation states that are deemed so-called enemies of the U.S., let's say, meddled in elections in the way of influence versus directly kind of basically stuffing ballots, right? Because I think, again, it kind of goes back to how the popular media treats, air quotes, hacking and cyber attacks. And a lot of it is the age-old kind of, what do they call that? Influence. What the hell do they call that? Now I'm having a mental blank. In any case, they will try to influence people through social media. Right. Like there's whole organizations set up in Russia whose sole purpose is to create fake social media accounts and content to influence the election.
Yeah.
For example, or influence anything to basically cause disruption here in the U.S. So they produce this video. However, the interesting part about this is the video showed that hackers computer screened as they typed in commands and pretended to hack a voter registration system. However, investigators watched the video and noticed snippets revealing computer code, file path, file names, and IP addresses, and identified that it came from Iran and was not the U.S. so-called Proud Boys group. So, I question how much of what we see on social media, especially in those images,
it could have been a deepfake.
Exactly. But the images that people post, how much of that is really seeded, with foreign nation states to create disruption here in the U.S.
And how easy the public is generally swayed based on like what they see from a video. Like we had that whole thing with Biden showing up on the lawn and he didn't even say like more than like 10 words. It wasn't anything useful, but there's a whole right-wing people with and this is all green screen. The president's not in the office. This, Trump's still there.
But was that seeded by Russians? Propaganda was the word I was looking for. Propaganda. Okay. It's propaganda.
Yeah, and it was what was the point? He didn't say anything useful. And they're steering an entire culture around this. And obviously people are paying attention because they have a huge following on it. But just where's the general public's ability to have common sense and not be swayed? Like if we're talking 80% of the people that are being swayed by this kind of crap, that scares me from just the general education and
because Tyler, people want to believe what they read on the internet.
They'll believe whatever they want to believe.
I want to believe the truth is out there.
Does it matter?
Right.
Well, that's the thing. I think we need to educate people that it does matter. That you have to scrutinize what you see. But
that's not tradition. The tradition, especially for older people, was that what you saw on the evening news was the truth.
What you see in the newspaper and the evening news,
and the newspaper printed the truth. And so if it's called news, it was the truth. It wasn't some slanted, made-up stuff. It was actually what was going on. So, I mean, I think it's challenging to convince people that they have to scrutinize things that they see posted because you see, all of us see it all the time, and people buy into it 100%. And of course, these actors know exactly how to do that.
But it's harder and harder to validate things, even Snopes or whatever. It gets difficult to validate things.
Yeah.
And then, how do you trust who's validating it? But then you go to the other end of the spectrum, and you expect the social media giants to validate it. And if anyone has anything to say about the election, it gets taken down or has a warning message slapped on it. And you're like, but what if that was? How do you know what's true on the internet?
You don't anymore.
How do you on the internet? No one knows you're a dog.
Yeah, and it's what it comes down to, Larry.
Yeah.
Even the people that do this for a living, it is very difficult to find validation sources and do good due diligence. So use your damn common sense.
I mean, I've thought of this for years. I mean, what's to say somebody that all the election ads we see, not just on the internet, but say, just billboards, signs on the side, mailings. Who says they're all locally oriented or originated? Does an organization could fund somebody, pay somebody to run an ad here?
Yeah,
Are they
They
screening?
commonly do.
Yeah,
There's a lot of tests that the Russians did with the IRA to run propaganda via social media to affect change in the physical world. Like, hey, we're all meeting at this place at this time, and then like hacking into cameras and seeing like, hey, did people like actually meet there? And they're like, oh, like mission accomplished. Now we know we're going to continue these campaigns because we got people
to work,
believe in a story.
Yeah, Tyler, you mentioned something about doing that for years type of thing. And like for many years, my mother-in-law would send these mass mail to all of her friends about, oh my God, Bill, if you send this thing, Bill Gates is going to give $1,000 or the Toll House cookies. And then it became politically motivated and blah, 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 blah. And for a period of about 3 years, I responded to every one of her posts, reply all, because she didn't know how to use BCC, with the link to the Snopes article. And then she got smart and found out that Snopes was in question of
Snopes at some point took a downturn a weird direction.
Yeah, but so then that was okay because I had done it so much that the people she was forwarding to started to question all of it.
That's where we need to get to.
And every once in a while she slips and sends ones to me, and we get the reply alls of, why are you sending this to me? This is completely false. Like,
yeah. It makes you wonder if the Russians infiltrated Snopes.
Could be.
God
if they're
damn
smart,
it.
they would.
God damn it.
And they're smart.
Look at Tyler. Look at Tyler.
Tyler's like, I love
fight a hole
son of
through
a-
it.
my tinfoil hat. Tyler is
Ty-
rivaling
Tyler-
yours right now.
Tyler infiltrated Snopes.
It's
I
either
could
that.
tell.
It's one of those I can neither confirm nor deny type of looks.
Yeah.
And he's shaking his head. Nope. That means he can neither confirm nor deny.
We know that look.
It's all right, Tyler. As soon as you find that USB thumb drive with all your Bitcoin on it, then you can tell
Oh
us.
shit! None of it will matter then.
That
Right.
won't matter.
There's a couple great stories you can kind of refer to that is shown like how influential people can actually be in like the disinformation. I think it was we released and worked with I believe it was a Times article on Moldova and Moldova's involvement with mass political effect inside the United States. It was a front piece, and it dug very, very deep into how we looked at that, and it is fascinating, the political motivations, the monetary motivations, and actually who is behind that and how organized it can get. So if you are interested, I'm pretty sure it was either Times or Washington Post front cover. Just look for Moldova disinformation.
David Sanger's The Perfect Weapon kind of covers some of that as well, just to how, I believe it was his book, covers just how deep the Russians in particular, not that they're alone in their efforts, we're digging into this. Also along those lines, the way the media, in this particular case, I'm going to call it The Guardian, specifically for, I think, blowing this article out of proportion. Their headline is, UK could use Trident nuclear missiles to counter cyber attack. That's what they said. That's what they said.
Wait, what?
Now, like I searched the article for cyber, and I didn't see any direct correlations. The policy says that Britain would reserve the right to use nuclear weapons in the face of weapons of mass destruction, which includes emerging technologies that could have a comparable impact to chemical or biological weapons. They don't specifically
I mean, if you
say,
don't have computers, if you blow up all the computers and nuke them, then yeah, I guess they can't really.
I guess they can't.
protect you
The
anymore.
end of the world would tend to stop a cyber attack. So
It didn't seem like the direct quote was, if we succumb to cyber attacks, then therefore that means we can use nuclear weapons.
No,
That's not what they were saying, but that's the way the Guardian wanted to spin it in order to get people to click on it. So make sure that you scrutinize that, and when it gets emailed to all of your family members, like Larry says, that you clarify that. Like, I don't think Britain really said, like, hey, if you launch cyber attacks against us, we're going to bomb you with nuclear weapons. I don't think that's what Britain is saying. I think that would be a stretch. Perhaps.
You never know.
Well, because everyone wants to use cyber weapons. So if everyone's using cyber
No one
weapons
wants
and
to
no
nuke
one's bombing
anybody.
each other with nuclear weapons, then we can just go on using cyber weapons is kind of the vibe that I get
Yeah.
from everything that I've read.
I mean, if I had to pick between the two, like, I'm not going to lie, I probably would pick cyber weapons. But
Yeah, I agree.
Yep.
that being said, your water does have chemicals in it, so I don't know, like, that seems like a pretty horrible death as well.
But that was also a lame attack where they increased the line in the water. I don't know, but that seemed kind of lame. I don't know what that was all about. It seemed kind of lame.
All I can say is well water,
Was it?
septic, and the ability to go off grid.
Pure rainwater and precious bodily fluids.
It is scary when we think about industrial control systems.
Yep.
What did Josh Marpet had a great. Where did Jeff go? Jeff left, but Josh Marpet had
Jeff had a hard stop at 9:00.
Oh, okay. Josh Marpet had a great quote. He said, "Not only and it was beautiful. I meant to call Josh and tell him how beautiful this was because it was in the context of industrial control system security." And he said that not only does the Emperor not have any clothes on, the Emperor has his own OnlyFans account. I was like,
Wow.
I think that's the quote of the week on the Security Weekly Network. It was beautiful.
That's amazing.
It was beautiful. Poning the pen tester, if you use Wireshark, many of us do. They looked at the source code and determined that basically 17 years ago was when the bug was potentially introduced that was the root cause of a problem that could pwn people in Wireshark, which, I mean, we've seen with a lot of these systems. I mean, I remember talking to Marty Resch about Snort, Wireshark, processing data, and the complexity and challenges associated with that
For sure.
to provide that securely.
Yep.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Last article, Microsoft Azure's SDK is tricked into listing fake packages. The article kind of ends. It kind of ends in a kind of a like, yeah, I was able to introduce the malicious package or potential malicious package, but I don't know. Someone would have to choose to download it. But basically, it was different from some of the other attacks against the supply chain and packages. So it's not a dependency confusion. The researcher published their package to NPM, added the NPM account Azure SDK as a collaborator. When you do that, there's automated processes. Azure SDK accounts using NPM on GitHub appear to be bots configured to pick up any and all NPM packages that these accounts use and get it listed. It's kind of interesting dependency attack. Microsoft did eventually pull that package. So interesting dependency. Also, no, I lied. Last story was water is essential for living. Molson Coors disclosed a cyber attack disrupting its brewery operations. This was a ransomware attack against Molson Coors, and they had to stop production of water.
Water.
Beer.
Well,
Whatever they call it.
they may
They
have had
make
to,
more than Coors.
right.
in
Well,
Molson.
I mean, they could have been making
the
water to provide to people in Texas who are still without.
This is true. Breweries
So-
have been known to do that.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So still unfortunate they had to shut down because their customers will be missing their product.
Yep.
I think they should respond with nuclear weapons.
I mean, Johnny Lawrence
Why are
won't
they
be able to
vulnerable
get his
to
Coors
ransomware,
Banquet. So, what?
All right.
No one.
ransomware
No
part
one.
is-
Come on now.
What now?
I said Johnny Lawrence won't be able to get his Coors Banquet. Like,
Oh,
Who's Johnny
man.
Lawrence?
God.
Is that like an NFT?
Should be.
It's a nifty.
It's nifty.
nifty.
All right. You apparently need to go watch all the seasons of Cobra Kai, my friend.
Oh, I've only done episodes 1 and 2.
Good God.
And I am the most obnoxious person to watch Cobra Kai because, like, every 5 minutes, so my middle son and my wife and I are watching it, and I'm like, Mike Dean, mercy's for the weak. like just randomly, like throughout the whole leg. I'm like, Shannon. I'm like, sweep the leg. Like throughout the whole first 2 episodes, they're like, Dad, can you knock it off? I'm like, mercies for the weak.
Oh,
It's really bad. It's obnoxious. But I love watching it with my family because I'm like, Dean, wax on, wax off. It's like, Dad, knock it off.
Paint defense.
Oh, God, it's so awesome.
Yeah.
But it is a good show. Just don't watch it with me because I'm totally obnoxious.
Oh, dude, I'd be right obnoxious there with you. I had to I had to bite my tongue the entire time.
Oh, it's so much fun. In any case, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening to this episode of Paul Security Weekly. Larry, take us out.
Wax on, wax off.
Sweep the leg.
Wax. He said wax.